Thank you for being here and spending a little time with this story. I hope it gives you a calm and meaningful listening moment. If you enjoy stories like this, please consider liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, or sharing it with someone who may enjoy it too. In this story, Daniel Cross faces a choice that a rescue system refused to make. When the weakest people are left behind, one human decides that some lives are not harder to save because they matter less. Now, let's begin. The human who refused to leave the women who could not walk Kareth Well sat on the red moon Naravas, far beyond the bright shipping lanes of the Valor Alliance. It had once been a useful place. Its mines had fed mineral dust into filter cores, and those filter cores had kept air clean in rich orbital cities, hospital ships, and rescue craft across the Alliance. Now the mines were quiet. The cargo towers were rusted. The landing pads were cracked into long black lines. Red dust moved through the streets every morning like slow water, gathering against doors, windows, breathing vents, and the old metal rails that no train had used in years. Daniel Cross had been on Naravas for 7 months. He was a human maintenance technician from Earth, hired on a short contract to keep the settlement air plan alive until the next budget review. The review had already been delayed twice, which everyone in Kareth Well understood as a polite way of saying no help was coming. Daniel was 42, broad-shouldered, quiet, and difficult to hurry. He did not look like the kind of man who belonged in a forgotten alien settlement. He looked like someone who should have been repairing storm gates on Earth, or hauling people out of flooded roads with a rope around his waist. He had come to Kareth Well because the pay was honest and the work was real. That was what he told people. It was not the whole truth, but it was enough. On the morning the warning sirens began, Daniel was inside the West breathing house, kneeling beside a filter pump that should have been replaced 10 years earlier. The pump shook hard enough to make the floor hum. A child sat near the wall, wearing a patched breathing mask. 2 old women watched Daniel work with the patient silence of people who had spent too many years waiting for machines to fail. Mara's son stood beside the pump room door. She was Valari, with pale gray skin, wide dark eyes, and ridged bones along her temples. Her left leg bent wrong below the knee, a gift from the dust presses where she had worked as a young woman. She leaned on a polished metal cane, but her voice had no weakness in it. "That pump will not last the storm season," she said. Daniel tightened a coupling with one hand and held the pipe steady with the other. "No," he said, "but it might last the week. I can make the week matter." Mara watched him for a moment. Most off-world workers talked about contracts, limits, and formal responsibility. Daniel talked about days, hours, and breathing. "You are repairing a unit that is not on your work order," she said. "I noticed," Daniel said. "The company will not pay you for it. The pump does not know that." The child near the wall laughed softly behind her mask. Mara did not laugh, but her eyes changed a little. The West breathing house served the people who could not easily reach the central air plant. Most of them were women who had worked in the old filter core shops. Their hands had once packed mineral thread into the thin layers that cleaned ship air. Their lungs had taken the dust their products were meant to remove. Now the Alliance called them post-labor residents, as if a body became a leftover thing after it had been used. Daniel had learned their names during his first week. There was Etta Vorn, who had cleaned Haven 9, the old storm shelter beyond the West Ridge, back when the shelter still had a full crew. There was Nara Quill, who could tie mining cable in 6 knots by touch, though she could not walk more than a few steps without pain. There was Lisa Wren, whose lungs whistled when she breathed, but who could hear a failing valve before any gauge showed danger. There was Tavi Soul, who had no children of her own and somehow mothered every orphan in Kareth Well. And there was Mara's son, who had once been shift lead in the filter core plant. Many in the settlement still. "Listen when she spoke." Daniel finished tightening the pipe, then slapped the pump casing twice. The vibration eased. The room took a long breath through the vents. Etta Vorn lifted a trembling hand toward the ceiling. "Hear that," she said. "It sounds less angry." "Machines get angry when they are ignored," Daniel said. Mara looked toward the small window. The sky outside was red, but not in the usual way. A dark line had formed along the horizon, thick and flat, like a wall being pushed toward them. Then the settlement sirens began. They did not scream. Kareth Well had never been able to afford sirens that screamed. They moaned from the poles above the old tracks, low and tired, but everyone in the breathing house stopped moving. A public voice came through the wall speaker and said that the severe dust system red vein had changed direction. Priority extraction had been authorized for Kareth Well, and all residents had to report to the eastern landing pad. The child in the corner stood too fast and began to cough. Tavi's soul went to him, one hand on his shoulder, telling him to breathe slowly. Daniel wiped red grease from his fingers. Mara did not move. Priority extraction, she said. Daniel looked at her. That means something different here. It always means someone will be sorted, Mara said. Outside, the wind rose. Red dust tapped against the windows like fingernails. The Valor rescue ship came down 40 minutes later, pushing dust outward in hot rings. It was clean, white, and new enough to look insulting against the broken settlement. Its side doors opened before the landing feet settled. Rescue officers in smooth gray suits moved fast, setting up scanning posts, crowd rails, and a glowing line on the ground. Commander Soren Vey stepped down last. He was tall, narrow, and silver-eyed, with the stillness of an officer who had learned never to waste motion in a disaster. He did not sneer at Kareth Well. He did not insult its people. That almost made him worse. He looked at the cracked roofs, the coughing children, and the women leaning on canes, and his face said only that he had expected all of it. Daniel met him near the scanning line. Daniel Cross. Daniel said, Maintenance contractor. I know the air systems and ground routes. Soren checked the wrist slate in his hand. You are listed as useful technical staff, he said. You will board in the second group. How many groups are there? As many as conditions allow. Daniel looked at the dark wall of red vein beyond the eastern ridge. The storm was moving faster than the public warning had said. That is not an answer. Soren's eyes flicked toward him. It is the only accurate one. The scanners began calling residents forward. Young miners, healthy mechanics, children with good lung scores, and workers marked as suitable for reconstruction crossed the glowing line. The system spoke in a calm female voice, confirming priority and sending them toward the transport decks. Then Mara's son stepped forward with Etta, Nara, Lisa, Tavi, and the others from the breathing house. The scanner washed them in pale blue light. It paused. Daniel felt the crowd tighten. The system spoke again and listed mobility failure, chronic dust exposure, low reconstruction value, and survival yield below rescue threshold. Then it gave the final classification. Unrecoverable. No one shouted at first. The word was too clean. It landed like a stamp on paper. Mara stared at the scanner. Etta lowered her eyes, as if she had been expecting it. Nara gripped the rail so hard her knuckles changed color. Daniel stepped between the scanner and Soren. Run them again, he said. The scan is complete, Soren replied. Run them again. The result will not change. Daniel pointed toward the ship. You have cargo space. Strip the seats if you have to. They can lie down. Cargo mass is already assigned to water, medicine, and children. Then take them to Haven 9 by ground. Haven 9 is outside the safe travel window. It is 30 minutes by loaded crawler. For mobile bodies, Soren said. Not for this group. Mara's face hardened, but she said nothing. Daniel took one step closer to Soren. They are not cargo. They are not failed equipment. There are people still standing in front of you. Soren's voice remained level. I understand your reaction. Humans have a documented difficulty. Separating rescue purpose from individual attachment. In high-loss events, that difficulty becomes dangerous. You think this is attachment? I think your species often mistakes mercy for strategy. Daniel looked at the line of people waiting to board. Some would not meet his eyes. They were frightened, and fear had made them small. He did not blame them. Red Vein was almost at the ridge. If rescue never reaches them, Daniel said, how did your system decide they were impossible to rescue? Soren's jaw tightened slightly. It was the first sign of irritation. The system did not decide their worth. It calculated survival yield. That is just a colder way to say worth. Before Soren could answer, Mara touched Daniel's sleeve. Her hand was thin but steady. Do not waste your place, she said. Daniel turned to her. Mara pulled a flat metal tag from inside her coat. It was old, scratched, and stamped with the symbol of the filter core company that had left Kareth Well behind. When we worked the core presses, she said, they promised full disaster extraction for every registered worker and household. It was in the labor agreement. We kept the air clean for their ships. They said we would not be abandoned if the dust came for us. Soren glanced at the tag. That registry is inactive. Mara nodded once. Yes, we became inactive after our lungs did. Something in Daniel's face changed. He had seen broken contracts before, but this one had a particular cruelty. The women had spent their healthy years making the very filters that allowed rescue ships to fly through poison skies. Now a rescue ship stood before them, clean and sealed, calling them unrecoverable. The boarding tone sounded. The system called Daniel Cross as technical staff for Transport Deck 2. A rescue officer gestured toward the ramp. Daniel looked at the ramp, then at Mara, Nara, Lisa, Tavi, and the others behind the rail. Soren spoke quietly. If you refuse extraction, you will be listed as non-compliant. I cannot hold the ship for you. Daniel pulled the boarding band from his wrist. He sat on the rail. Then do not hold it, he said. He stepped out of the boarding line and walked back toward the West Road. Mara stared at him. What are you doing? Daniel stopped beside the first old cargo sled, half buried in dust. If you cannot walk, he said, we carry you. The rescue ship lifted before the hour ended. Its engines blew red dust across the empty landing pad and erased most of the footprints left behind. Daniel did not watch it leave. He was already inside the old equipment shed behind the breathing house, pulling open cabinets, checking fuel cells, and dragging out cables that had not been touched since the mines closed. Mara stood at the door with one hand on her cane. You should know something, she said. We are slow. I noticed. Some of us will panic when the dust gets thick. Some cannot breathe under stress. Some cannot be moved without pain. I noticed that too. Then why are you still here? Daniel lifted a rusted winch from a shelf and tested the crank. It moved after one hard pull. Because noticing it does not make you dead. That silenced her. They had one ground crawler with a cracked axle, 3 flat metal doors that could serve as stretchers, 5 serviceable breathing masks, 9 broken ones, a roll of mining cable, 2 emergency lamps, and a half-charged power pack. Daniel laid everything out on the floor and made the settlement look at it honestly. Haven 9 is our best shelter, he said. It has old storm walls and an independent air reserve. The main road is too open. We take the west cut through the mining yard, then the ridge tunnel if it has not collapsed. Nobody moves alone. Nobody unclips from the line unless Mara tells you. A young man who had stayed behind for his mother looked at the supplies. This is not enough. No, Daniel said. It is what we have. Mara studied him. You are not giving them comfort. False comfort wastes time. They deserve the truth and a chance. Nara Quill pulled herself closer on a low-wheeled stool. That cable is wrong for a straight pull. It will twist the first sled sideways. Daniel looked at her. Show me. Nera blinked, surprised. You are asking me? You know cable. Her fingers moved over the line, slow at first, then with old confidence. She changed the knots, crossed the tension points, and told Daniel where to place the handles. Lisa Wren leaned near the crawler engine. Her breathing was thin and rough. That valve is singing high, she said. Daniel crouched beside her. High bad or high dying? High warning, she said. Dying is sharper. Tavi Sol gathered the children and gave each one a task. Hold a lamp. Carry a cloth. Count breaths. Tell the person next to you when the line stops. Daniel watched the room shift. People who had been waiting to be abandoned began becoming useful to each other. The change did not come with speeches. It came with hands moving, cable tightening, masks being repaired, and names being checked. Mara came to Daniel while he fixed the crawler's axle brace. You listen quickly, she said. People survive longer when they stop pretending the expert is always the one with the tool. Most outsiders do not know that. Most outsiders leave too soon. They started at dusk, though the sky had turned so dark that time meant little. Daniel walked at the front with the crawler's guide bar against his hip. Mara walked beside the first sled, setting the pace. Nara sat on the rear support frame, one hand on the cable knots. Etta lay under two dust cloths, refusing to close her eyes because she said she needed to remember the old road. Lisa listened to the engine. Tavi kept the children between the sleds, where the wind could not take them as easily. Behind them, Kareth Well began to disappear. The first stretch was almost easy, which Daniel did not trust. Red dust rolled low across the ground, but the wind had not yet struck full force. They reached the mining yard with 20 minutes to spare by Daniel's count. Then the front left wheel sank into a buried rail groove. The crawler lurched. The first sled tipped. Etta cried out. A child screamed. Daniel threw his weight against the frame before it rolled. "Stop pulling," Nara shouted. "Stop, or you'll flip her." Everyone froze. Nara's eyes were sharp despite the dust on her lashes. "The tension is wrong. Daniel, move the sideline under the second bracket. Mara, shorten your pace. Children, lean left when I count." Daniel did exactly what she said. He did not translate it through his own pride. He just moved. The sled settled. The wheel came free. Mara looked back at Nara. "Still a thieving not witch," she said. Nara coughed, then smiled. "Still better than your factory knots." The children laughed because the adults did. The line moved again. High above them, a Valor drone followed through the dust. On the rescue ship, Commander Soren Vey watched the slow line on a wall display. Several officers stood behind him. Most looked uncomfortable. One muttered that the human had created an unnecessary loss cluster. Soren did not answer. He had expected the group to break apart by now. The data model had predicted panic, separation, respiratory failure, and collapse before the mining yard. Instead, the line had stopped, adjusted, and continued. "They are wasting time," an officer said. Soren watched Nara point from the rear sled while Daniel changed the cable. "No," he said slowly. "They are spending it." The officer looked at him. Soren did not explain. He was not yet ready to admit that there was a difference. Red Vein hit the mining yard 8 minutes early. It arrived not as a wall, but as a living weight. The first gust struck Daniel sideways and filled the world with red. Lamps became dim circles. Voices became small and close. The wind shoved dust into every seam and fold of cloth. "Masks tight," Daniel called. "Hand on the line. Nobody lets go." Mara repeated the order in Valari. Her voice cut through panic better than Daniel's because the others had trusted it for years. The crawler crawled forward. Every meter had to be earned. Daniel's shoulders burned. His hands began to bleed inside his gloves. He could feel the machine failing through the guide bar, every shudder and skip in the axle. Lisa struck the metal frame twice. "Stop," she rasped. Daniel stopped at once. "What is it?" "Pressure valve. It will burst if you push the hill." Daniel opened the engine panel. Dust hit his face shield. The valve was trembling. "How long?" "Soon." He pulled a clamp from his belt and looked at the hose angle. He could patch it, but only if someone held the frame steady. Mara moved toward him. "No," Lisa said. "Not." "Mara, her leg will shake." "Tavi, hold the lower bar." Daniel turned the clamp only twice. Not 3. Again, Daniel listened. The patch held. The crawler climbed. On the rescue ship, Soren leaned closer to the display. The human kept giving authority away. That should have made the group less efficient. Instead, it made them more stable. Each person seemed to become calmer when their knowledge was used. The algorithm had measured muscle strength and lung damage. It had not measured memory. It had not measured being trusted. "Update survival prediction," Soren said. The wall display changed. The numbers rose. Not enough to be safe, but enough to be wrong. At the ridge cut, Red Vein turned violet. The old road narrowed between two broken slag walls. The crawler had to pass close to a drop where mining runoff had carved a deep trench. Daniel took the front line himself. Mara walked behind him, one arm hooked through the guide cable. A sudden gust slammed the rear sled sideways. Nara screamed a warning, but the sound vanished in the wind. The sled struck a rock. Its back corner lifted. Etta Vorn slid under the dust cloths, her hand reaching for empty air. Mara grabbed for her and missed. The side rope snapped. Etta went over the edge. The whole line froze. For 1 second, the only sound was the storm. Then Edda's voice came from below, thin and terrified. Mara. Soren's voice cut through Daniel's wrist radio. Cross, continue forward. The storm core is less than 7 minutes from your location. If you descend, the group fails. Daniel dropped to one knee and swept his lamp over the trench. He caught a glimpse of Edda on a ledge 3 meters down, half covered in moving dust. Mara grabbed his arm. Her face had gone pale gray. If you go down there, we may all die. Daniel looked at the line. Children shaking. Women coughing. Nara gripping the broken rope as if strength could pull time backward. Lisa bent over her own mask, fighting for breath. He understood the calculation. He truly did. That was what made it hurt. He clipped the main cable around his waist. Hold this line, he said to Mara. Daniel, if we leave her, nobody believes the line anymore. Not even the one still on it. Soren's voice sharpened. Cross, this is not strategy. Daniel climbed over the edge. It is the whole strategy. The trench was worse than it looked. Dust poured along the walls in red sheets. Daniel slid twice before his boots found a brace point. His left glove tore on a jagged plate. Warm pain spread across his palm. Edda lay curled against the ledge, one hand pressed to her mask. The mask had cracked along the side. Each breath pulled dust through the break. Daniel reached her and braced his back against the wall. Edda, look at me. Her eyes opened. I slowed you. You fell. Different thing. Leave me the lamp. Go. Daniel took off his own mask. Edda tried to turn away. No. Borrow it, Daniel said. I need you awake enough to insult my knots later. He pressed the mask to her face. The first breath without it burned his throat like hot wire. He turned his head away from the worst of the dust, but there was no clean air. Above him, Mara shouted something. He could not hear the words. He fixed a loop around Edda's chest with one hand. His injured palm slipped. He tried again, slower. Pull, he shouted. The cable tightened. At the top, Mara wrapped the line around her waist. Nara locked the knot against the sled frame. Tavi put the older children on the rope behind her. Lisa, barely able to stand, pressed both hands to the cable and pulled with the others. The first pull lifted Edda. The second lifted Daniel. The third nearly tore the line loose, but Nara shifted the knot and screamed at everyone to lean together. They came over the edge in a rush of dust and bodies. Daniel rolled onto his side, coughing hard. Mara shoved his mask back over his face. It did not seal right away. He tasted blood. Edda gripped his sleeve. You came back, she whispered. Daniel could not speak yet. He only nodded. The line moved again. After that, no one asked whether they should leave someone to gain speed. The question had been answered at a cost everyone could hear in Daniel's breathing. The ridge tunnel was half collapsed, but passable. Edda, still weak, insisted the old maintenance path curved left after the second support arch. She was right. Naras. Knots held the sleds over broken ground. Lisa warned them when the crawler battery began to heat. Mara counted steps, rests, and breaths. Tavi kept the children from looking back. Haven 9 emerged from the storm as a black shape under the ridge. It was not beautiful. It was a squat shelter of layered metal and buried air tanks. To Daniel, it looked like a promise made in steel. They reached the outer door with the storm core almost on top of them. Daniel hit the manual panel. Nothing happened. He tried the emergency lever. The screen flickered to life and displayed a line that read, Access denied. Non-priority survivor group. For a moment, nobody understood. Then the screen displayed the same line again. Mara stared at the screen. Even here, Daniel slammed his fist against the panel, then forced himself to stop. Anger would not open the door. Soren, he said into the radio. Override Haven 9. Now. Static answered. Then Soren's voice came through. I'm attempting remote access. The door remained sealed. The wind pushed the sled sideways. Daniel and Mara leaned into them. Commander, Daniel said. Open the door. Soren's breathing sounded close over the channel. The system is blocking command authority. Why? A pause. Haven 9 is under asset closure protocol. Mara closed her eyes. Daniel looked at her. What is that? Soren did not answer at first. Mara did. It means Kareth Well is not a settlement anymore. It is a closed asset, a thing written off. Daniel stared at the door. The storm shelter was full of air, full of walls, full of exactly what these people needed. It was refusing them because somewhere, in a clean office far away, someone had decided the place no longer justified rescue cost. Soren's voice came again, quieter. The protocol should not have remained active during a live disaster. Mara looked up at the sealed door. But it did. Daniel put both hands on the emergency lever and pulled. Pain shot through his torn palm. The lever moved a few centimeters and stopped. "Help me," he said. Mara took hold beside him. So did Tavi. Nara locked a rope around the lever, and the older children pulled. The door groaned, but did not open. Lisa tilted her head, listening through the storm. "There is power behind the panel," she said. "Not enough for the main motor. Enough for memory." Etta lifted her head from the sled. "Move me closer." "No," Mara said. "You need to breathe." "I cleaned this place for 19 years, Etta said. "I know where the little fools are the service codes." "Move me closer." They carried her to the panel. Etta's fingers trembled over the old keys. Dust stuck to the blood on Daniel's hand as he shielded the panel with his body. "The engineers used to say codes out loud," Etta whispered. "They thought cleaners heard nothing. They thought cleaners were furniture." "Etta," Mara said slowly. Etta entered 4 symbols. The panel buzzed and rejected them. She closed her eyes. "Not that one. That was the water lock." The wind hit so hard that everyone slid half a step. Daniel's knees bent. He could feel his strength thinning. The world around the edges of his vision went gray. "Again," he said. Etta entered another code. The panel woke with a deeper sound. The screen displayed a line that said secondary service access was enabled. Nara pointed to the lower hinge. "Daniel, cable there. If the motor catches, the door will drop back. Tie it open." Lisa pressed her ear near the panel, coughing between words. "Left relay is dead. Right one clicks. Use the right." Mara held Etta upright. Tavi gathered the children and made them breathe in time with her voice. She did not sing loudly. She spoke the rhythm like a path. In. Hold. Out. Again. Daniel tied the hinge cable with his injured hand, and Nara corrected him from the sled. "Not through there. Under, then over. Let the door pull against itself." He changed it. Etta entered the last command. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then Haven 9 opened. Not fully. Not like a generous door. It opened grudgingly, a narrow black gap fighting the storm. Daniel shoved the first sled through. Mara pushed the second. Nara's cable held the door from falling back. One by one, the women and children crossed the threshold. Daniel stayed outside until the last child was in. Mara turned back and saw him still in the red wind, pulling the outer cable loose so the door could close. "Daniel," she shouted. He stumbled once. Mara went back for him. Together they fell inside as the door sealed behind them. The silence inside Haven 9 felt impossible. For a long moment, nobody moved. The shelter lights flickered awake in strips along the ceiling. Old air, stale but breathable, flowed from vents in the walls. Then a child began to cry. Tavi held him. Nara laughed once and covered her face. Etta touched the floor as if greeting an old enemy that had finally done one decent thing. Daniel sat with his back against the door, mask in his lap, trying to breathe without coughing. Mara knelt in front of him. "You are bleeding. Not as much as it sounds. That is not comforting. I have been told I am bad at comfort." Mara looked at the women behind her, then at the closed door. "They called us unrecoverable," she said. Daniel managed a thin smile. They were bad at that too. Inside the shelter, the night did not become peaceful. Haven 9 had air, but the reserve tanks were old, and the medical cabinet held more empty slots than supplies. Daniel made himself stand after 10 minutes because the children were watching him too closely. He checked the interior seals, found 2 slow leaks, and showed Nara how to brace them with cable clamps. Lisa listened to the tank lines and told him which one was safe to open first. Mara tried to make him sit again. "You can barely breathe," she said. "Then I will work slowly. That is not obedience. Never claimed to be good at that." She took the clamp from his injured hand and finished tightening it herself. Her own fingers shook from exhaustion, but she did not ask him to take the tool back. That mattered to him. It meant she no longer thought survival depended on him alone. For the next 6 hours, the shelter became a small, stubborn world. Etta lay under a thermal cloth and corrected Daniel every time he read an old label wrong. Tavi made the children count water cups and pass them in order, so no one drank from fear. Nara checked every knot in the shelter lashings and muttered that Valor engineers had never respected gravity. Lisa slept in short pieces, waking whenever. The air changed pitch. Daniel watched them from the wall bench, coughing into a cloth and saying little. He had carried them to the door, but inside the door they carried the night together. That was the part the drone could not measure from outside. The rescue had not ended when the storm door closed. The rescue had become a choice repeated in smaller forms. Share the water. Hold the frightened child. Tighten the leak. Listen when the sick woman says the pipe is wrong. Believe the old woman when she remembers a room everyone else forgot. By morning, when the storm softened from a roar to a distant growl, Mara found Daniel asleep beside the manual release wheel. He had tied a safety line from the wheel to his own wrist, in case the damaged door shifted during the night. She looked at the line, then at his bandaged hand. Stubborn human, she whispered. Etta, awake under her cloth, answered without opening her eyes. Useful flaw. On the rescue ship, Commander Soren Vey watched the shelter seal. No one on the bridge spoke. The data wall showed the impossible line of survival. Every time the model had predicted collapse, someone in the group had done something the model did not know how to value. Nara's knots. Lisa's hearing. Etta's memory. Mara's command. Tabi's calm. Daniel's refusal. An officer behind Soren said, "We should mark the case as human interference with standard extraction." Soren did not turn around. Standard extraction left living people outside a functioning shelter. The protocol classified Kareth Well as a closed asset. I can read. The officer went silent. A secure message arrived from Valor Disaster Authority before the storm had fully passed. It ordered Soren to preserve the public rescue record, remove unauthorized protocol details, and classify Daniel Cross as a non-compliant contractor whose actions created avoidable exposure. Soren read the message twice. For most of his career, he had believed that discipline meant accepting the ugly calculation. He had watched ships lift away from burning moons and flooded domes. He had told himself that rescue was not kindness. It was selection under pressure. But the image of Daniel removing his en masse would not leave him. Neither would Etta at the door panel, reading a code remembered from years when engineers had treated her as invisible. The algorithm had called her unrecoverable. Without her, the door would have stayed shut. Soren opened the raw drone record. He copied everything. The investigation began 12 days later in the central hearing chamber of Valor Station. By then, Red Vein had passed. Kareth Well was damaged beyond easy repair, but its people were alive inside emergency housing. Daniel Cross arrived with his left hand wrapped, his throat still raw, and medical instructions not to speak more than necessary. He was placed in the rear seating area, not at the central table. The hearing was not supposed to be about him, at least not officially. The first report described a chaotic local evacuation, a human contractor's unauthorized delay, and an unexpected shelter access anomaly. Then Soren Vey stood. The chamber quieted. He was not known for drama. That made the silence sharper. The first report is incomplete, Soren said. A council minister frowned. Commander, this hearing has accepted the preliminary record. Then the hearing has accepted a false record. He sent the raw files to the chamber wall. The images appeared one after another. The scanner marking Mara and the others unrecoverable. Daniel stepping down from the ramp. The slow line moving through red dust. Nara correcting the cable. Lisa is stopping the valve burst. Etta falling. Daniel going over the edge. The mask pressed to Etta's face. The sealed door at Haven 9. The words Asset Closure Protocol glowing on the panel. The chamber changed as it watched. At first, the officials looked annoyed, then guarded, then very still. Soren spoke without raising his voice. The human did not interfere with rescue purpose. He followed it after our system abandoned it. A minister stood. Commander, you will limit your remarks to operational facts. Those are the operational facts. Mara-san sat at the witness table with Etta, Nara, Lisa, and Tavi behind her. She had refused a ceremonial robe and wore her old gray settlement coat. The metal labor tag rested on the table before her. When she was asked to speak, she rose slowly. Daniel watched from the rear row. Mara did not look weak. She looked tired in a way that made the room itself seem guilty. We made filter cores for this alliance, she said. Our hands packed the layers that cleaned air for rescue ships. When the dust entered our lungs, we were told our work mattered. When our legs bent and our breathing failed, we were told we were dependents. When a storm came, we were told we were unrecoverable. No one interrupted her. She placed her hand on the old labor tag. We do not ask to be called heroes. We ask that no living person be called impossible to save while rescue is still possible. We ask that no system be allowed to hide abandonment behind clean words. Her eyes moved across the chamber, then rested for a moment on Daniel. A human contractor with no authority remembered what our alliance forgot. A life is not worth less because it is harder to save. Daniel lowered his eyes. He had not expected the words to hurt. The legal debate lasted for hours. Officials tried to narrow the case. They called it an exception. They argued about resource limits, evacuation math, and emergency discretion. But Soren's data had already done its work. The slow line had survived because people who were classified as burdens had been treated as part of the rescue, not obstacles to it. By the end of the hearing, the old rescue classification was suspended across every Valor disaster zone. 3 weeks later, the new rule was read into Alliance law. It said that no living person could be classified as unrecoverable while rescue remained possible. The official name was long, careful, and forgettable. It mentioned mobility protection, disaster equity, and shelter access reform. No one in Kareth Well used that name. They called it the carrying rule. The first time Daniel heard the phrase, he was sitting outside a temporary air tent on Naravas, watching workers install a new shelter beacon above the rebuilt road to Haven 9. His cough was better, though cold air still made his chest ache. His hand would heal stiff, the medic said, but it would heal. Mara came to stand beside him, leaning on her. Kane, the new evacuation crews are angry, she said. Good, Daniel said. Angry people read manuals carefully. She looked at the shelter beacon. They have added low mobility sleds to every rescue craft in this sector, and manual shelter overrides, and labor history checks. Sound expensive? Very. Daniel nodded. About time something expensive was spent in the right direction. Mara was quiet for a while. Across the road, Etta was arguing with 2 engineers about the height of the service panel. Nara sat on a crate, teaching a young rescue officer how to tie a proper load knot. Lisa listened to the new air pump with the severe expression of a judge. Tavi had a cluster of children marching in a line, practicing how to hold a safety rope without tangling it. They were not symbols anymore. They were instructors. Mara watched them, and some of the hardness left her face. Why did you really stay? She asked. Daniel considered giving the simple answer. Because it was right. Because the ramp felt wrong under his feet. Because he had seen too many systems turn people into numbers and call it maturity. Instead, he said the truest thing he could say without making it grand. Because you were still there. Mara looked at him for a long moment. That is not how the Alliance thinks. I know. It may not be how humans always think either. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. No, but it is how we know we should. Above them, the new beacon flashed once, sending a clean signal into the red sky. It did not promise that every rescue would be easy. It did not promise that every life could be saved. No honest rule could promise that. It promised only that difficulty would no longer be mistaken for worthlessness. Far away, in training rooms and rescue decks across the Valor Alliance, new officers watched the footage from Kareth Well. They watched a human step down from a ship that could have carried him to safety. They watched him build a slow line out of broken equipment, old knowledge, and stubborn mercy. They watched women once marked unrecoverable open the shelter door the system had denied them. Some officers called the footage inefficient. Some called it dangerous. But none of them forgot it. And when the lesson ended, the final line on the training wall was not written in the language of the law. It was written in the words the people remembered. If they cannot walk, we carry them. After everything Daniel Cross had done, those words became more than a rescue rule. They became a promise. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Daniel Cross was not the strongest man in the galaxy because he could fight harder than anyone else. He was strong because when a system looked at the weak and called them too costly to save, he still saw people worth carrying. And maybe that is what makes humans different. Not that we are fearless, not that we always win, but that sometimes when the world says someone is too slow, too broken, too old, or too hard to rescue, a human heart can still answer. Then we move slower. Then we carry them. If this story moved you, please give the video a like, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you enjoy emotional science fiction stories about humanity, dignity, sacrifice, and the hidden things that make us different, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this channel keep telling stories like this. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself, and I hope to see you in the next story.